The neighborhood froze, a tableau of suburban stillness shattered by a single, furious voice. She stood in the middle of the street, a traffic island of pure indignation, holding her clipboard aloft like a holy decree. Her face was a mask of crimson rage, her voice echoing through the manicured lawns and identical townhouses, screaming at the 3 cops that I was trespassing on public property. Without even asking a single question, without a moment of listening, she had taken it upon herself, as if she were the law incarnate. She believed her self-proclaimed authority would make me submit. That her incessant threats, her frivolous, formally printed tickets, and her orchestrated community meetings would finally break my spirit and scare me away. But when she called 911 to deliver the final, decisive blow, she had unknowingly ripped off her own mask of authority. And I had waited for this moment. The moment she pressed the button to call the police was the moment she laid all her cards on the table. Had brought her arrogance, her meticulously constructed facade of power, to the game. And I, in turn, would rip that mask off right in front of everyone. I live a quiet, deliberately unobtrusive life in the Maplewood Gardens complex. My name is David Thompson, and at 32 years old, my world primarily consists of code, algorithms. In the soft clatter of my mechanical keyboard, as a remote software engineer, my home is my sanctuary and my office. Karen Mitchell, 36. Has been the self-proclaimed and unchallenged president of our homeowners association for the past 3 years. Since moving in, she has taken it upon herself to provide what she calls conformist leadership to the community. With her signature blonde bob, immaculately pressed emerald green jacket, and a clipboard that she wielded like a weapon of authority, Karen patrolled our complex like a neighborhood dictator. She truly believed she had the right to control everything from the color of the flowers, people planted to the precise times visitors were allowed to park their cars. Little did she know that today's confrontation, the one she had initiated with such theatrical confidence, would reveal a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about power. The whole nightmare started 3 weeks ago with a simple, practical decision. I decided to reorganize my workspace. For 2 years, I'd been crammed into a tiny spare bedroom that barely fit my desk and essential equipment. A digital cave where I wrestled with complex software architecture. Seeking a better environment, I moved my entire operation to a larger, sunnier room on the ground floor of my unit. It had glorious natural lighting that reduced eye strain, more than enough space for my multiple monitors, and most importantly, it was significantly quieter during my frequent video conferences with international clients. Karen appeared at my door the very next morning. At precisely 9 a.m., she was already in full uniform. The green blazer, a crisp white blouse, and the ever-present clipboard held at the ready. "David, I need to inspect your commercial business license," she announced, foregoing any pretense of pleasantries. Her tone was flat, accusatory. "Hey, I can see from the street that you've got serious computer equipment in there, and that constitutes a commercial operation in a residential zone. It's a clear violation." I sighed, attempting to summon a well of patience I knew would be tested. "Good morning to you too, Karen. This isn't a commercial operation. It's simply my home office. It's completely legal under both city zoning laws and our lease agreements. I'm a software engineer. This is just where I work from home." But she shook her head with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never been successfully challenged. "No," she said, her eyes narrowing as if she could see through my walls and into my very intentions. "I can tell this is more than just working from home. You've got server equipment, multiple monitors, professional lighting. This is a full-scale business, and it violates our community standards. Karen, it's a powerful desktop computer, not a server rack. The monitors are for coding and data visualization. The professional lighting is a single ring light for video calls, so I don't look like a ghoul to my clients. Can you please show me the specific HOA regulation I'm supposedly violating?" "Oh, sure." Expression curdled into one of pure condescension. "David, I don't think you understand how this works," she said, her voice dripping with pitying authority. "As HOA President, have the authority and the responsibility to interpret our community guidelines in whatever way best protects our property values and maintains our neighborhood character." She scribbled something on her clipboard with a theatrical flourish, the pen scratching loudly in the quiet morning air. "You have 72 hours to provide proper documentation of your business license and a zoning variance from the city, or you will face penalties." A week later, the harassment escalated significantly, moving from verbal warnings to what was clearly intended to be intimidating legal action. I found an official-looking notice taped to my door, printed on thick, cream-colored letterhead that read Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, complete with a professionally designed embossed seal that looked disturbingly legitimate. The document, written in dense legalese, informed me that I was being fined $200 for unauthorized commercial use of residential property and creating an eyesore that diminishes community aesthetics. The language was formal and intimidating, full of phrases like covenant violations, cease and desist, and community standards enforcement. When I knocked on Karen's door later that day to discuss the fine, she answered wearing her full HOA President persona, a veritable suit of armor made of self-importance. "David," she said, her arms crossed, blocking the doorway. "I tried to work with you, but you've left me no choice. Your office setup is clearly visible from the street, and it sends the wrong message about our community. We have standards here. I have the authority to make determinations about what serves our collective best interests." "Who is the collective, Karen? Is on this HOA board you keep mentioning?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I'd like to appeal this fine to them." She gave me a patronizing smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "Confidential information, David. HOA governance isn't something ordinary residents need to concern themselves with. Just pay the fine. If you don't like my decision, you can take it up with the board at the next quarterly review, but I wouldn't recommend it." The third wave of her attack was far more insidious, focused on character assassination and social isolation. Karen began a whisper campaign that would have impressed a seasoned political operative. She sent carefully worded emails to all residents, warning about suspicious commercial activities happening in the complex and encouraging everyone to remain vigilant and report any unusual behavior that might compromise our community's residential character. The emails were masterfully crafted to sound official and concerning without making specific legally actionable accusations. "It has come to the attention of the HOA board that certain units may be engaged in activities that violate our residential zoning requirements," one email read. "While we cannot discuss specific ongoing investigations, we encourage all residents to be aware of any neighbors who seem to be operating businesses from their homes, especially those involving significant electronic equipment or frequent deliveries." The effect was exactly what Karen intended. Mrs. Johnson from the unit next to mine, a sweet elderly woman who used to bring me cookies, started asking pointed questions about my computer business. Mr. Peterson, a retired accountant with whom I'd always had friendly conversations about the stock market, began giving me suspicious sidelong glances whenever we passed in the hallway. Even the maintenance staff seemed nervous around me, as if they'd been warned that I might be running some kind of illegal hacking operation. The social isolation was subtle, but profoundly effective. Conversations would halt when I entered the mailroom. People who used to smile and wave now avoided eye contact, their faces suddenly drawn to their phones or the floor. I realized Karen had successfully positioned herself as the noble protector of community values while painting me as some kind of insidious threat to their peaceful way of life. The fourth escalation was her most calculated and devastating yet. Karen organized what she called an emergency community safety meeting in our community center, sending official-looking invitations to every resident. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's deliberately chosen because most people would be home from work and available to attend. I arrived to find the community center packed with nearly every resident in the complex. Karen had set up a full presentation, complete with a projector, professionally printed handouts, and even a small podium that made her look official and authoritative. She was wearing her most formal green blazer and had clearly spent considerable time preparing her materials. "Good evening, neighbors," Karen began, her voice resonating with the confidence of a seasoned politician. "I've called this meeting because we face a serious threat to our community's integrity and property values." She clicked her first PowerPoint slide, which displayed a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my office window, taken from the street at dusk. The image was captioned in bold, ominous letters, "Unauthorized commercial operation." "As you can see," Karen continued, gesturing at the screen with a laser pointer she'd apparently purchased for the occasion, "we have a resident who has converted his apartment into what appears to be a full-scale business operation. Multiple computer monitors, professional equipment, and constant activity that clearly exceeds normal home office use." She had somehow managed to take photos that made my perfectly legal home office look like some kind of suspicious command. Centered, the presentation continued with slides showing cherry-picked property value statistics from other complexes where commercial infiltration had allegedly caused neighborhood decline. Karen had charts and graphs that looked impressively professional, though I noticed she never cited specific sources for any of her data. When we allow residential units to be used for commercial purposes, she declared, her voice rising with dramatic urgency, we risk losing our community character and our property values. She concluded with a dramatic flourish that would have been impressive if it weren't so completely fabricated. The HOA board has conducted a thorough investigation and determined that this commercial operation poses a significant risk to our community. We are demanding immediate cessation of all business activities, or we will be forced to pursue legal remedies, including potential eviction proceedings. The room was dead silent as she stared directly at me, letting her threat hang in the air. Some people think they can ignore community standards and do whatever they want. But that's not how responsible neighborhoods work. Several residents, now thoroughly alarmed, asked questions that Karen answered with the smooth confidence of someone who'd never been challenged on facts. When Mrs. Rodriguez asked about the specific rules being violated, Karen replied that HOA regulations are complex legal documents that require interpretation by qualified board members. When Mr. Garcia inquired about the appeals process, she assured him that all HOA decisions are made with the community's best interests at heart. And our process is fair and transparent, though internal deliberations are, of course, confidential. I sat there listening to this virtuoso performance. I had to admire Karen's thoroughness. She hadn't just made up a rule. She'd created an entire fictional legal framework, complete with official-sounding procedures and threats that would intimidate most people into immediate compliance. What she didn't realize was that her elaborate charade was about to collide with someone who actually understood the law. The fifth and most aggressive escalation came 72 hours after the community meeting. Karen appeared at my door at exactly 8 a.m., dressed in her most formal business attire and carrying a leather portfolio that screamed official business. With her was a stern-looking man in an expensive-looking suit who she introduced as Mr. Davies, our legal counsel. "David Thompson," Karen demanded formally, her voice cold and imperious. "You have failed to comply with HOA directives regarding the unauthorized commercial use of residential property. As president of the Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, I am here to deliver your final notice." She opened her portfolio with theatrical precision and handed me a document that looked like it had been prepared by a high-powered law firm. The letterhead read, "Final notice of violation and demand for compliance," in bold, intimidating font. "You have 48 hours to completely cease all commercial operations and restore your unit to residential use only," Karen continued, her voice taking on the tone of a judge delivering a sentence. "Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, including fines of up to $5,000. All associated legal fees and potential eviction proceedings." The fake lawyer, Mr. Davies, nodded gravely, playing his part in this elaborate power play. I scanned the document, which was actually quite impressive in its official appearance. It cited various housing codes, zoning regulations, and HOA powers. That would sound terrifyingly legitimate to anyone who didn't actually understand property law. "This seems very thorough," I said calmly, looking up from the paper. "Can I ask which law firm prepared this documentation?" Karen and her companion exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance that told me everything I needed to know. "That's confidential legal information," Karen replied, recovering quickly. "What matters is that you understand the seriousness of this situation. The HOA has been more than patient with your violations, but our responsibility is to protect the interests of all residents, not to accommodate one person who thinks the rules don't apply to him." As they turned to leave, Karen delivered her final threat with obvious triumphant satisfaction. "David, I want you to understand something clearly. I've been managing communities for years, and I know exactly how to handle residents who think they can do whatever they want. You can choose to comply voluntarily, or you can learn the hard way that HOA authority is real and enforceable. Either way, this commercial operation is ending." What Karen didn't realize was that during these 3 weeks of escalating harassment, I hadn't just been passively enduring her attacks. Every evening, after she thought she'd scored another victory in her campaign of intimidation, I'd been conducting my own meticulous investigation. With my background and technical skills, I had been poring over property records, state HOA regulations, corporate filings, and, most importantly, discovering fundamental facts about our community that would completely destroy Karen's entire house of cards. The irony was perfect. While Karen was congratulating herself on her thorough and intimidating legal strategy, she had no idea that she was about to face someone who actually understood the law far better than her fake legal counsel ever could. Monday morning arrived with Karen's masterpiece of overconfidence. A 911 call to report that I was illegally occupying community property in violation of her HOA authority. I watched from my window as she stood on the sidewalk, gesturing dramatically at my office, while explaining to 3 police officers how she was heroically protecting community interests from a dangerous rule breaker. Officer Thompson knocked on my door at exactly 9:15 a.m. He was a middle-aged veteran with the kind of patient, professional demeanor that comes from years of dealing with neighborhood disputes. "Good morning, sir. I'm Officer Thompson. We received a complaint about unauthorized use of community property. Mind if I ask you a few questions?"
Us.
"Of course, officer. Please, come in." I gestured him into my living room where I had prepared a carefully organized presentation of documents on the coffee table. "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about the situation here." Officer Thompson sat down and opened his notebook, clearly expecting this to be a routine housing violation that would be resolved with a simple warning or citation. "Ms. Mitchell claims you're operating a commercial business in violation of HOA regulations," he began. "She says you've been warned multiple times and have refused to comply with community standards." I nodded thoughtfully. "Officer Thompson, before we discuss any alleged HOA regulations, I'd like to show you something that might change the entire context of this complaint." I handed him a certified copy of my property deed, notarized and bearing the official seal of the county recorder's office. "This document shows that I am the sole owner of the entire Maplewood Gardens complex, including all 47 residential units and every common area facility." Officer Thompson's eyebrows shot up as he examined the paperwork, his professional composure momentarily broken by surprise. "You own ... this whole place?" he asked, looking from the document to me. "That's correct," I confirmed. "I purchased the entire complex from Sunrise Construction Company in August of 2019 as a single investment property. Every person living here, including Karen Mitchell, is my tenant. I collect rent from each unit individually, but legally. I am the sole property owner." I could see the gears turning in his head as he processed this information and began to understand the implications. "So when Ms. Mitchell talks about HOA authority," he said slowly, "she's claiming to have power over property that you actually own." "Exactly. And that's just the beginning of what she's been doing." I opened my laptop and pulled up a detailed financial spreadsheet. Over the past 2 years, Karen has been collecting money from tenants under the pretense of HOA fees, despite having no legal authority to do so. The revelation of my legal background is the moment that changed everything. "Officer Thompson, there's something else you should know about my background. Before I became a software engineer, I earned my Juris Doctor from State University and worked for 3 years as a compliance officer for a major real estate investment group. I specialize in real estate law and corporate governance. What Karen has been doing isn't just harassment. It's a sophisticated pattern of criminal fraud." Officer Thompson sat back in his chair, his expression shifting from routine duty to serious investigation. This was much more complex than a simple housing dispute. "Why didn't you mention your ownership and legal background earlier?" he asked, a perfectly reasonable question. I smiled slightly. I needed to see exactly how far Karen would take this. I needed comprehensive, undeniable evidence of her pattern of deception before taking action. Her call to 911 today was, frankly, perfect timing. At that moment, as if on cue, Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 3B knocked urgently on my door. "David, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I saw the police cars and I can't stay quiet anymore." She looked at Officer Thompson with obvious relief. "Officer, Karen Mitchell has been terrorizing residents in this complex for months. She told us that anyone who didn't follow her rules would be evicted immediately, and we were all afraid of losing our homes." Mrs. Rodriguez continued with growing confidence as she realized she finally had someone in authority who would listen. "Karen created all these crazy rules that seem designed just to make our lives miserable. No children playing in the common areas after 6 p.m., $25 fines for leaving shoes outside our doors, $50 cleaning fees every time someone used the barbecue area. She said these were all legitimate HOA powers, but if David owns the whole property, then she's been lying to us about everything." Officer Thompson asked for more details about Karen's financial activities, and I was ready with comprehensive documentation. "I've been tracking every transaction meticulously," I explained, opening a detailed accounting spreadsheet on my laptop. "Karen has collected a total of $47,000 from tenants over the past 24 months, claiming these were mandatory HOA fees. Every single penny has been deposited into her personal Wells Fargo account. I showed Officer Thompson the bank records I'd obtained through legal public information requests. What makes this particularly egregious is that Karen has been paying herself a $1,500 monthly salary as HOA president. Compensation for money she collected fraudulently. She essentially created an elaborate scheme to collect a second stream of rent payments that she has no right to receive. And it gets much worse, I continued, opening another folder of evidence. Karen has been signing maintenance contracts under the fake HOA name, but she's been deliberately overpaying vendors and pocketing the difference. For example, she hired her brother's landscaping company, Mitchell Brothers Lawn Care, for $800 a month. When the market rate for a property this size is only $300, the $500 monthly overpayment has been split between Karen and her brother. Officer Thompson was taking detailed notes as I walked him through each fraudulent transaction. She's done similar markup schemes with cleaning services, pest control, and even snow removal. In every case, she's chosen vendors who would participate in her kickback scheme rather than legitimate companies that would do the work at fair market rates. I pulled out copies of contracts that Karen had signed using her forged HOA letterhead. What's particularly sophisticated about her fraud, I explained to Officer Thompson, is that she created an entire fictional corporate structure. She filed fake articles of incorporation for the Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, created official-looking documents and letterhead, and even established a business checking account using the fraudulent corporate identity. The legal implications are severe. Under state law, this constitutes theft by deception. Mail fraud if she used postal services for any of her fake HOA communications, potentially racketeering, given this was an ongoing criminal enterprise. What evidence do you have of her intent to defraud? Officer Thompson asked. I opened my laptop to a folder containing dozens of saved emails and documents. Karen has been very careful to create paper trails that make her fraud look legitimate. She sent official-looking notices, maintained detailed financial records, and even held fake board meetings with herself to create the appearance of proper corporate governance. The sophistication of her deception actually works against her legally because it proves this wasn't a mistake. It was a premeditated plan. At this point, Mr. Peterson knocked on my door. David, I apologize for interrupting, but I overheard Mrs. Rodriguez talking about the HOA fees, and I think you need to know what Karen told me last month. Officer Thompson gestured for him to continue. Karen came to my apartment with a bill for $300, claiming the HOA board had voted to assess each unit for emergency roof repairs. Mr. Peterson explained, his voice tight with anger. When I asked to see the board meeting minutes, she told me that HOA governance was confidential and that residents weren't entitled to see internal documents. She said if I didn't pay within 10 days, I would face eviction proceedings. Officer Thompson looked at me with obvious concern. How many residents has she been targeting with these fake assessments? I consulted my research notes. Based on my investigation, Karen has been systematically extracting money from at least 38 of the 47 units. She's been particularly aggressive with elderly residents and single mothers, probably because she assumed they would be less likely to challenge her authority. The staggering scope of Karen's fraud was becoming clear to Officer Thompson, and I could see him realizing this was a major criminal case, not a simple civil dispute. Mr. Thompson, what's your plan for addressing this situation? He asked. Looked out my window at Karen, who was still standing on the sidewalk with complete confidence, obviously expecting Officer Thompson to emerge with me in handcuffs. I'm calling an emergency community meeting for tonight, I said. It's time, everyone. Learn the truth about who really owns this property and what Karen has been doing to all of us. But before I face her in front of the entire community, I have one more crucial phone call to make that will eliminate any possibility of her talking her way out of the consequences. At 7:00 p.m. that evening, the community center was packed beyond its normal capacity. Word about the morning's police visit had spread through the complex like wildfire, and it seemed like every single resident had shown up to see what would happen. Karen sat in the front row, wearing her most formal emerald green blazer, flanked by the same man who had posed as her legal counsel. Her expression radiated confidence, as if she expected this meeting to be her final public triumph over a troublemaker who had dared to challenge her authority. I stepped up to the podium, carrying my laptop, a box of documents, and the small digital projector I'd borrowed from my office equipment. Good evening, neighbors. I know there's been a lot of confusion and concern about recent events, so I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what's been happening in our community. The room was completely silent, all eyes focused on me. Before I begin my presentation, I want to give Karen the opportunity to explain her actions this morning when she called the police to report that I was illegally occupying community property. Karen stood up with theatrical confidence, clearly relishing what she thought would be her moment of vindication. David Thompson has been flagrantly violating community regulations for weeks, she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been successfully challenged. As president of the Maplewood Gardens Homeowners Association, I have the legal responsibility to protect our community's interests and property values. When someone refuses to follow reasonable rules that apply to everyone else, the HOA has no choice but to enforce compliance through appropriate legal channels. She gestured toward her companion. Our legal counsel advised that we had exhausted all reasonable alternatives and that police intervention was necessary to protect the community from further violations. The fake lawyer nodded solemnly, maintaining his role in Karen's elaborate charade. Thank you for that explanation, Karen. Now, I'd like everyone to see something that might change their perspective on this situation. I connected my laptop to the projector and displayed my property deed on the large screen at the front of the room. The document was clear and official, bearing multiple notarized seals and the signature of the county recorder. This is the warranty deed showing that I am the sole owner of the entire Maplewood Gardens complex. That includes all 47 residential units. The community center where we're sitting right now, the parking areas, the landscaping, and every other facility on this property. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the audience as people began to understand the implications. I purchased this entire complex from Sunrise Construction Company on August 15, 2019. As a single investment property, every person in this room, including Karen Mitchell, is my tenant. You pay rent to live here, but you do not own individual units. The murmurs grew louder, turning into a buzz of confused and angry chatter. Karen's face had gone noticeably pale. But she stood up again, desperation masquerading as confidence. That can't be right. We all signed purchase agreements. We're homeowners, not renters. I understand the confusion, Karen, I said sympathetically, though my sympathy was for the residents she had misled. But what you all signed were lease agreements, not purchase contracts. Sunrise Construction may have used misleading language, but legally, you have all been tenants from day one. And let's discuss what this means for Karen's claims about HOA authority, I continued, clicking to my next slide. Under state law, a homeowners association can only exist when there are multiple property owners who agree to shared governance. Since I am the sole owner, there cannot legally be an HOA for this property. The room was completely silent as people began to grasp the full scope of Karen's deception. Karen hasn't just been claiming fake authority, I said, my voice resonating with cold anger. She's been using that fake authority to steal money from all of you. I displayed my financial analysis spreadsheet, showing months of careful documentation. Over the past 24 months, Karen has collected $47,000 from residents under the pretense of HOA fees. This money has been deposited directly into her personal Wells Fargo checking account, not into any legitimate community fund. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. People started talking all at once, their voices rising in a crescendo of disbelief and fury as they realized how extensively they'd been deceived. Mr. Garcia stood up and pointed a trembling finger at Karen. You told us we'd be evicted if we didn't pay those fees? You made us afraid to question anything. Karen remained seated, her face now completely drained of color, her mask of authority shattered. Let me show you the extent of her financial fraud, I continued, clicking through additional slides. She's been signing maintenance contracts using fake HOA letterhead, but deliberately choosing vendors who would participate in kickback schemes. Her brother's landscaping company, for example, has been paid $800 monthly for work that should cost $300. The difference has been split between Karen and her brother. I displayed copies of the fraudulent contracts, each bearing Karen's signature, and the fake HOA seal she created. She's done similar markups with cleaning services, pest control, and snow removal. In every case, she's prioritized personal profit over our community's needs. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. Karen, you told my elderly mother that she'd lose her apartment if she didn't pay a special assessment for roof repairs. My mother was so scared she skipped meals to save money for your fake fee. The room erupted in angry voices as other residents began sharing their own stories of Karen's intimidation tactics. Mr. Peterson, the retired accountant, stood up with obvious fury. Karen came to me with a $300 emergency assessment, claiming the HOA board had voted on it. When I asked to see the meeting minutes, you told me HOA governance was confidential. You were just making everything up. As the anger in the room reached a fever pitch, I raised my hand for silence. There's one more thing you all need to hear. I have someone on the phone who can confirm everything I've told you tonight. I activated the speakerphone on my cell phone, and a clear, professional voice filled the room. Good evening, everyone. This is Richard Caldwell, former CEO of Sunrise Construction Company. I've been briefed on tonight's situation, and I want to set the record straight about several important facts. The room fell completely silent as everyone strained to hear every word. First, Caldwell's voice boomed from the speaker. Sunrise Construction never authorized anyone to establish a homeowners association for Maplewood Gardens. Mr. Thompson purchased the entire complex as a single investment property, which legally precludes the formation of an HOA under state law. Second, Ms. Mitchell contacted our company repeatedly over the past 2 years, asking about HOA formation and claiming she had been given authority to manage the property. We told her explicitly, in multiple phone calls and written communications, that she had no such authority and that any attempt to collect fees or enforce rules would be illegal. Karen finally stood up, her voice shaking with desperation. That's not true. You told me I could form an HOA. You said it was normal for communities to have resident management. Caldwell's response was immediate and devastating. Ms. Mitchell, I have time-stamped copies of every email and transcripts of every phone call between our companies. We never gave you permission to do anything except pay your rent and follow your lease agreement, like every other tenant. Room erupted as residents turned to stare at Karen with a mixture of rage and disgust. She looked around desperately, searching for even one sympathetic face in the crowd, but found only anger and betrayal. Officer Thompson, who had been standing quietly in the back throughout the meeting, stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, based on the evidence presented tonight in my investigation this morning, I need you to understand that you're facing serious criminal charges. The district attorney's office will be contacting you within 48 hours regarding fraud, embezzlement, and theft by deception. Karen's fake lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear and began quickly packing his briefcase. It was obvious he wanted to distance himself from this imploding situation as rapidly as possible. I want everyone to know that all the money Karen collected illegally will be refunded, I announced to the room. Every fake fee, every fraudulent assessment, every penny she stole will be returned to you with interest. And starting now there will be no more fake HOA rules, no more intimidation, and no more arbitrary fines. Karen stood up one final time, her voice breaking with desperation. You can't do this to me. I was trying to help this community. I was making it better. But her words fell on deaf ears. Every person in that room had been victimized by her lies, and there was no sympathy left for the woman who had terrorized them for so long. She grabbed her purse and rushed toward the exit, her fake lawyer following close behind. The moment the door closed behind them, the entire room erupted in thunderous applause and cheering that lasted for several minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, tears streaming down her face. David, we owe you such an apology. We should have trusted you instead of believing Karen's lies. How can we ever make this right? I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. We make it right by building a real community together. It's one based on honesty, transparency, and mutual respect. This is just the beginning. 2 weeks after our dramatic community meeting, the legal consequences for Karen Mitchell began unfolding. Exactly as I had predicted. The district attorney's office filed formal charges, including fraud in the first degree, theft by deception, and operating an illegal business enterprise. During their investigation, prosecutors discovered that Karen had pulled an identical scheme at her previous residence in Portland, Oregon, where she had collected over $30,000 in fake HOA fees before residents discovered her fraud and she fled town. Rather than face a jury trial that would have certainly resulted in serious prison time, Karen accepted a plea bargain. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service specifically focused on elder care, and was ordered to pay full restitution of the $47,000 plus interest. Additionally, she was required to move out of the complex within 30 days and was legally banned from ever serving in any community management role again. The transformation in our community atmosphere was immediate and remarkable. Without Karen's oppressive presence and constant surveillance, residents began interacting freely for the first time in years. People who had been afraid to socialize or organize activities suddenly felt comfortable expressing themselves and building genuine relationships with their neighbors. I organized a series of weekly community meetings to establish transparent communication channels and democratic decision-making processes. Instead of Karen's fake HOA, we created a tenant Advisory Council with elected representatives from each building. The council meets monthly to discuss maintenance issues. Plan community events and suggest improvements that would benefit everyone. Mrs. Rodriguez was unanimously elected as our first council president, and she proved to be everything Karen wasn't: honest, collaborative, and genuinely committed to serving residents rather than exploiting them. David showed us that real leadership means transparency and accountability, she said during our first official meeting. We're going to make sure no one ever has the opportunity to abuse power in this community again. The money recovered from Karen's fraud and the elimination of her kickback schemes, I was able to invest significantly in genuine property improvements. The landscaping contract went to a reputable local company at fair market rates, saving over $500 monthly that was redirected toward community benefits. Our playground area received a complete overhaul with modern, safe equipment. The community center was renovated, with comfortable new furniture, updated lighting, and a small kitchen facility. I also installed a comprehensive security system, not to spy on residents as Karen had threatened, but to ensure everyone's safety. Mr. Peterson, with his professional accounting background, volunteered to manage our community finances with complete transparency. Every month, he publishes detailed reports showing exactly how maintenance funds are being spent. This is how financial management should work, he explained. Open books, detailed records, and no hidden agendas. Mrs. Johnson, who had initially been suspicious of me, became one of my strongest advocates. I'm embarrassed that I believed Karen's lies, she admitted. She convinced us to be afraid of each other instead of working together. Now we have a landlord who actually listens. Genuine community spirit began to flourish. Mr. Garcia organized monthly barbecue parties. Mrs. Lee, a retired teacher, started offering morning Tai Chi classes in the garden. The children could finally play freely, and their laughter, once silenced by Karen's rules, became the new soundtrack of our neighborhood. I established a community improvement fund, and the first approved project was a large community garden where residents now grow vegetables and flowers together. To commemorate our community's transformation, we created a small memorial garden on the very spot where Karen's car used to be parked, complete with a fountain and a brass plaque reading, "Maplewood Gardens Community, built on trust, transparency, and mutual respect." Next to it, converted a forgotten storage room into a community learning center with free Wi-Fi and educational resources, where Mrs. Lee now helps kids with homework and teaches seniors basic computer skills. Sitting in my home office today, the sunlight streaming in through the very window that started it all, I reflect on how Karen Mitchell's desperate attempts to control our community through fraud and intimidation backfired so spectacularly. Her actions, intended to isolate and punish, ultimately united us. She relied on fear and deception, but she never expected to encounter someone who would counter her with meticulous documentation and unwavering truth. Ironically, Karen's downfall, triggered by her own arrogant 911 call, sparked the very positive change that has transformed our neighborhood into the thriving, respectful community she only pretended to want.